one day I started exhibiting anger on the court and anger in other areas. And then my dad said to me, why are you so angry? How did you become so angry? Who taught you to be so angry? He couldn't put it together. My father had no idea. He couldn't see himself in the equation. He had no idea that, where do you think I became so angry from? It was very clear. It's funny because when you're a kid, like he said that to me and I didn't know the answer. I actually didn't know it then. I very clearly know what the answer is now. All right, guys, we're back again with the PEM Pod cast, and I'm Worthington, your host. And we had an interesting week. Last week was our 1-year anniversary of the PEM Podcast, and YouTube has deleted our channel. We're appealing, but it's very doubtful we'll get it back, so we are not on YouTube today. We're going to be looking into other options. We're going to be going on X as one of the options to try and get somewhere where there's support for free speech. Yeah, it's pretty disheartening that that's the world we live in now, complete censorship. We're seeing a lot of places. We're seeing it definitely with the psychedelic treatment world, and a lot of people trying to gain traction with their business being stifled and censored, and even some made up things around, reviews, stuff like that, where Google is accusing people of making up the reviews or attempting to get a following, or Instagram actually did that to someone, accused one of the businesses that runs a sanctuary retreat center that they were falsifying reviews and testimonials around their retreat and what they're doing, which was a complete lie. So we got people now who want to start collecting evidence and see if maybe we can bring a slander lawsuit against some of these guys, because they're falsifying things. They're lying about what people are up to, and it's their business reputation, their livelihood that's at stake. So, I would love to see some class actions, be filed against some of these large tech companies and what they're doing, and start to bring some accountability for their actions. So. That's where we're at this week. Definitely a fight, definitely an issue that we're going to be facing probably for a long time to come, as, we attempt to grow even the business with psychedelics. That seems to probably be the main thing that got us booted from the channel. We did some ads that showed a bit of the website, showed a mouse kind of clicking a link, going to psychedelics, and they were not happy. Interesting, though, because I then started creating, clone accounts and things like that, or not clone accounts, but throwaway accounts. And I'm still running Google ads with the same ad content that got us booted. It got my other channel, the Pragmatic Ego Management channel, deleted. And that's a deleted channel. It's not even a suspension. It's a full deleted channel. So that just shows you how extreme they're going after us.
There's almost 200 people in here right now in the fucking TikTok.
On ours right now?
Yes.
Oh, we're live. Yeah. Hey guys. Hey, I'm glad to have you here. Support us, man. We're getting censored nonstop. It's awesome to have you guys here. We're not used to having that many people. It's been taking a long time to build a following. We were kind of getting a little traction on YouTube because we had, for us, it was a lot. We weren't advertising. I wasn't boosting, doing anything. I think we had like 1,200 followers or something. What did we have on YouTube? Do you remember? We can't even see our channel now. They deleted our channel to the point we can't even see it. We can't even access our own content on there. It's so insane, just because of a couple psychedelic ads that we did that showed. I think it had to do with showing the mouse click on the link, and then they just booted us. But I'm just so tired of this woke world we're living in, where there's things that you can't say and can say. It's just gotten out of control. It's enough. Enough is enough. So, we're talking about gathering some evidence and possibly looking into class action suits and really going after these guys. There's a lot of people being affected by this. And it's not just in the streaming channels. I experienced the same type of issues with the tech companies that are in the rental arena of things. So Airbnb, VRBO, things like that. There could be hearsay, just rumor of something. I had a neighbor just doesn't like me, called Airbnb said I was selling drugs to my guests in my house, which is an absurd thing. I make plenty of money off my guests. My house is a well sought after property right on the beach. So to sell drugs to them would be stupid. Do you know how cheap drugs are these days? Meth is selling for like $800 a pound or something right now. It's so stupid. That's not worth it at all. So it's ridiculous. But they booted me for that, and I had to fight with Airbnb. And we're seeing it all over. And I imagine, I'd love to have people join us and talk about their experiences with even, companies like Uber and Instacart and all of these tech companies that are part of people's livelihoods now and that have no accountability for, basically firing people. That just something seems really off there. And I don't know how you manage it. I know they're private companies and they have the right to manage their company the way they want. But, when it comes to firing someone, you can't just fire someone just because you can't, because you don't like them. You can't just fire someone and then, maybe discriminate against them. There are laws that I think should be applied here as well, because it's insane to just wake up one day and your livelihood is taken from you. That's just madness, with no warning and no even explanation for what you did wrong. Just read our community guidelines. That's always what they like to say to you. Read our community guidelines, and the community guidelines are broad and cover a wide swath of different information and concepts, and so you have no idea really what you've done, and yet you've lost an enormous amount of work. For us, it was 1 year worth of work, and possibly your livelihood if you're monetized. And it's all bullshit at this point. We need to do something about that. So we're gonna get into some videos and doing our we're gonna do some reactions here. What about the one live we did where we had that great back and forth with that one gentleman? I forget his name.
Yeah.
Do we still have that?
We got a message here. California is at will fire stage. You can fire for any reason other than race, religion.
Really, they're at will. But see, my buddy works for Home Depot and he's not union, and they can't just fire him. But maybe that's their larger corporate structure and how they approach it. I guess what I'm saying is, how do we know that it wasn't those things then? How do we know it wasn't race? How do we know it wasn't an at-will fire state? That's interesting. I'd love to get more information on that and see how far it goes. Yeah, I'm in California, so I guess that applies. I guess we got fired in an at-will state, but it seems a bit crazy that you can just do that to somebody for speaking their mind is pretty wild.
He was born in Belarus in the former Soviet Union, didn't speak a word of English when he arrived. His entire extended family lived together in a tiny-ass apartment in Queens, and as the foreign kid, he was once bullied into drinking urine from a soda can. He was a D and F student, and pretty much everyone thought he would fail in life. Despite all of that, though, this guy not only refuses to complain about anything ever, he is wildly optimistic, upbeat, and freakishly driven. A born entrepreneur, he began by ripping flowers out of people's yards and selling them back to them. He had an entire lemonade franchise system while he was still riding a big wheel. And in his teens, he was routinely making thousands of dollars a weekend selling baseball cards until his father forced him to go to work in the family business for $2 an hour. But he didn't waste time whining about it, he just got to work. And just out of college, by being an early adopter of the internet, he took his father's discount liquor store from being a local store doing $4 million a year in revenue to an internet phenomenon doing $45 million in revenue in just 5 years. Now, leveraging his unique ability to identify where consumer attention is going next, he founded the pioneering digital agency VaynerMedia, which serves some of the largest companies on the planet. And along the way, he's also built a massive social following of his own that rings in at around 3.5 million devoted followers. He is a people-first kind of guy, and you can see it in everything that he does, from his employees to his fans and partnerships.
That was a video about Gary Vaynerchuk and just basically how extremely successful he's been at what he's done. Looks like he was born in Belarus and started at an extremely young age being an entrepreneur. And I've been an entrepreneur for basically my whole life as well, nowhere near as successful as he was. I'd love to hear stories like that. My dad cussed.
Why do you curse so much? For a guy who doesn't need to.
Because I only believe in authenticity. It's how I talk. Like when I think about, do I care about my employees? It feels more like in my brain and my heart and my soul, do I give a fuck about my employees more than do I care about my employees? That's from my brain and heart to my mouth. I am willing to deal with the ramifications of me being my full self.
Do you curse at home?
A ton.
In front of your kids?
Yep. I'm just not devastated to go into my 4th grade teacher and Mrs. Thompson's like, you have a real problem. I'm like, what's that, Mrs. Thompson? Your daughter curses. I just don't see that as a real problem. Me and Mrs. Thompson just don't see the world the same way. Again, I am the byproduct of Mrs. Thompson telling me my whole life that I would be a failure. Mrs. Thompson thought that a D in science was going to be my downfall, just like she thinks saying fuck is her downfall. I don't agree.
That's awesome. There was a show, I believe it was on Netflix, hosted by Nicolas Cage called Bad Words, and they did some brain scans and some assessments on cortisol levels and different aspects, different, I guess you would say vital indicators of the body and things like that to see what the effects of cursing were on people that were cursing. And it turned out it was healthy for you. It created a reduction in stress levels. It allowed people to be able to endure more pain. They did one where they had someone put their hand in like a really cold, like ice water, which kind of hurts, when it's first in there and kind of numbs your hand up, and wanted to see how long they could handle it versus where they were not cursing and when they were cursing. And the more that they were cursing, the people who were cursing, I should say, were able to endure pain more, and again, just had less stress levels, and basically was all across the board more healthy for the person who's cursing. So it's kind of funny, but it's a weird double-edged sword, because cursing only exists because we've said that these particular sounds that come out of our mouth are profane. And so if we hadn't done that, would there be such a thing as cursing? That's a hard world to imagine. Imagine a world where we never made any words taboo, where we never made anything off limits. What would the experience be like, and how would language affect us? I think it would affect us very differently, I imagine. So that's a strange world to try and even imagine in your mind's eye, a place where that never even happened. And of course, in a world like that, I think we'd all be walking around naked or doing whatever we want, because none of it would be offensive or taboo. Not doing whatever we want, I shouldn't say that, because assaulting people is a different deal. That has a very powerful impact on the person being assaulted. But as far as just exhibiting language and things like that, Shakira, what's up? You made it. Okay, and we're on X now, guys. We're trying to support the free speech channels, and supposedly Elon is attempting to support freedom of speech, so we're all about it. We haven't set up a premium account, but I'm going to pay for that, because I'm going to start supporting people that are about freedom of speech. We're live on X. We're live on X, guys, so that's great. So only TikTok right now is where we're limited as far as letting you guys see the videos we're reacting to. So keep that in mind. So it's a little strange when I'm watching the video and you can't see anything. You just see me sitting here.
Parents give money because they want control. Listen, I get tens of thousands of DMs from kids that are in their 20s and 30s that have deep underlying resentment and depression because their parents are quietly paying for their lives. Which I then tell them, like, don't take the money, jerk. If you don't stand on your own 2 feet and you're a grown-up, you will be sad. Thank you.
Hey, look, money is directly linked to control, right? That's what it is. It's exactly what it is. When I hand currency to another individual, I expect a certain behavior. The behavior I expect is either they hand me a product, they hand me something tangible that I'm buying at the grocery store or the local convenience store, or, whatever it is. I'm online, I'm on Amazon, whatever I'm purchasing, I'm using that money to exact a type of behavior. If it's a service, then I'm doing that for a service. Money is all about control, 100%. I want a certain result. I'm giving you this currency for that. And so then, I expect you to behave in that way. Otherwise, if you take my money and you don't behave that way, we're going to have a real problem, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to. Because we're suckers, huh? Yeah, are we suckers? I don't know. If you're a kid and you don't want to do what your parents, your parents' bidding, and not just, let's say you're 20 years old, you're an adult, really, technically. I don't think at 20 you're truly an adult, but technically in the eyes of the law, you're an adult, and you don't want to live under the rule of your parents. Then accepting their money is probably a problem. They're going to expect certain things. They're going to expect certain behaviors for the money that they're contributing. And I don't think that that's wrong necessarily. That again, is the entire system that we're living under. Now, is it wrong globally speaking? Meaning the world we've created as humans, because I look at different levels with this. As humans, the world we created, which began really with the global institutionalization of agriculture, which led to land ownership, which then led to eventually the invention of currencies and things like that. Was that a positive thing? I would say no. I would say absolutely not. It's also hard saying no to your kids. Right. Well, it depends on what kind of parent you are. And yeah, saying no to your kids can definitely be tough, but I think you have to be careful with that. I've had a lot of friends who are really decent people, really mean well. But for instance, I have a friend, great guy, amazing person, but I think he felt some guilt about having married a woman who was really not a great person herself. She became a meth addict. She was a liar, a cheater. She was deceptive. She even tried to kind of have him eliminated from the picture. I don't want to say she tried to have him murdered. It wasn't exactly that, but almost close. I'm not going to get into all the details because I'll just detract from what we're trying to say here. But bottom line is, he had 4 kids with the woman, and then because of the dynamic of the relationship, he felt some guilt over that. And so then he wouldn't want to say no to his kids. And one of his kids, it was especially his youngest one, and I would say that coincided with how toxic the relationship was with his ex-wife, and the guilt he felt over that. He overfed his youngest child, and she became obese, and for him, he's not a rich guy, didn't have a lot of money. For him, showing love, man, hey, anytime she's hungry, here, let me provide for you. And that's sad, really. But he's a great guy, and he meant well. But he felt bad about not having a mother there. He felt bad about having her having a mother that was a liar and a meth addict and a manipulator. That was difficult for him. So, yeah, absolutely. Guilt is a big thing too with parents. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think what makes it hard to say no to your kids is, well, you want your kids to enjoy life and have a great experience, but also I see a lot of times it can be guilt, feeling like whatever the experience is that they're being provided maybe isn't adequate. Maybe it's not the vision you had. But see, that's where this gets really interesting, because let me give you a different vision of what I see when it comes to parenting. I have a decent amount of wealth. I'm not wealthy. I'm not rich per se. I have the potential to become rich. I'm right on the cusp of something right now, and what's holding me back is a lot of the battle against the societal structure I'm facing. So I'm battling that with rental properties that I have and local municipal government, and I'm fighting a huge lawsuit. If I wasn't fighting that, I'd be way better, well off than I am right now. I'm also fighting a bunch of censorship and a ton of uphill battle with Psychedelics, the company that I'm building around psychedelic treatment and stuff like that. So I'm facing some restriction and some friction and some resistance about me achieving this next level of affluence, let's say. But where I'm at is fairly comfortable to most people. So if I was to have a child, let me give you a vision what I would do. I would not live in the homes that I have, and I would not provide that experience for my kids. I would actually move to a very poor area, and I would live poor with my kids and never even let them know that I had any amount of wealth. And then I would set up a structure so that my businesses and my wealth would be maintained. Sometimes I might sneak off to take a vacation here or there and not let the kid come or something like that. I know it sounds mean. I know this sounds really messed up, but the whole point is that I want my kid to grow up strong and tough and have gratitude and not have resentment. One of the problems with parents who are wealthy is if they're attempting to be good parents and not just create some spoiled piece of shit, then what they do is they restrict their kids and they don't give them everything they want, and they force them to work hard, and they become kind of the boss, the authoritative figure. The problem with that is that then they become the brunt of resentment. I actually just went through this with a woman. I had a woman I've been seeing for a while who came over, and she was feeling lonely or whatever. We have an interesting relationship because my relationships aren't the normal traditional types of relationships. But anyway, I told her on the phone, I said, look, you're welcome to come over. It'd be great to see you. We'll hang out. But I have to go to my mother's tonight and I have to leave, and you can't stay the whole night because I need you to go. Well, she comes over and she likes to drink a lot. She's drinking and she's smoking her vape pen or weed, and she gets hammered. She passes out. And then I'm stuck. And I told her I had to leave by 10 at the latest. It's going on 11. It's going on 12. I'm trying to wake her up. She's not going anywhere. I try to wake her up a couple more times. She's like, oh. So then what happens is finally around 1 a.m, she wakes up and she gets a drink of water and she wants to go back to bed. And I'm like, no, I told you I have to leave. And now you've held me up by 3 hours and it's 1 a.m. I'm going to get there 3 a.m. I'm going to be up at 7. And so she's like, oh, can't you just leave me here and you leave and I can just stay here? No, that's not my boundary. My boundary is you need to go right now. We're friends, we have a great relationship, but understand that there are certain boundaries and I got certain things going on where no, I can't just leave you here. I've got roommates, I've got things you're going to have to go. We discussed that up front. Well, she took that. And what did she do? I became the bad guy because I'm establishing a boundary. And then there's all this resentment and all this anger and a lot of energy that comes directed at the boss because I was the boss. Now, I didn't have time that night, and I was a little irritated about this. This become a pattern. Another night before this, she had shown up hammered drunk, then got the spins, was puking, couldn't get in the Uber, made a big deal over that. So, that basically... shared to live, encouraging more viewers. Oh, thank you, Shakira. Yeah, share. Get them to come in. So basically what I'm saying is, in the Toltec understanding of the art of stalking, which has to do with managing other people's egos, when you're the boss, people are going to resent you. So as a parent who has affluence and then you restrict your kids, they're going to resent you for it. Versus the real way to handle that, in my opinion, would be to without all that affluence. So you have to make a huge sacrifice. In my opinion, deciding to become a parent should be viewed as the largest sacrifice, or one of the largest sacrifices you can make, other than maybe dying for your country or something like that. I think becoming a parent, you should look at it like your life isn't your own anymore. You're not the most important thing anymore. Now you have to take care of this, this being that you've brought into the world, and you have to do it in such a way that they are going to be the best that they possibly can be. So me personally, I would not allow affluence into that equation. And then I would later, at a certain date, at some point, I would then, at some point when I determined or got the feeling that their egos had been mitigated to a solid degree, and that they were not of the mindset of entitlement and didn't feel like they were owed anything, and showed a great deal of gratitude and showed a great deal of patience and presence and being willing to work hard and have, a stick-to-itive attitude and determination. Then one day I would say, hey, guess what? You guys never had any clue, but look at all this money we actually have, and now you get to enjoy a bit. That would be, imagine the mind fuck. You might be a little upset for a while, but let me tell you, get over it. And I've had people kind of fight me over this, but I don't think they're looking at what I'm looking at, which is the end result of a person who is well-established, able to work hard, able to not feel like they're entitled or deserve anything, and then get this huge benefit. I wish my parents had been capable of doing something like that for me. So anyway, that's kind of what I see with parenting. But yeah, money is control, guys, 100%. That's the point of it. My money says that I expect X, Y, or Z. There's no doubt about it. That's what it's about.
I actually sit and truly try to convince myself that I have lost one of the 5 most important people in my life, and that is the biggest thing I do that leads to the biggest happiness I have. What? You didn't sell enough earrings today? Seriously though, people lack perspective. It's actually remarkably easy if it becomes the way you see the world. What? Like, we have completely lost perspective as a society. Do you know how many people on earth have it way worse than you? Billions.
So this argument here is one that's been coming up a lot. I'm going to be talking about this more and more. There's a razor's edge there, and I don't know that it's so simple, right? Because the bottom line is we live in a world that is run by material goods and services and the economic structure of our world. So, like, for instance, I had a friend a while back tell me, hey man, if you lose your house, you're going to be all right. Like, it's going to be fine. You'll figure it out. You'll continue to be just fine and have a great life. And he's not facing losing his house. So for him to say that, it's much easier than to be sitting in the situation where you could actually lose your house and your livelihood and be facing, some sort of serious setback that affects your quality of life. And for how long will it affect your quality of life? Look, we all want to be free. I would say, even if you don't know you want to be free, you do. Trust me. The happiest moments that people have in their lives are always moments of freedom. And I always say that, hey, look back at your life and look at what the most happiest time of your life was. And what I tell people is you can't count like when your daughter was born, or you can't count when you met your spouse. Not those things. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, tell me about a moment where you were in the moment and you just had this amazing experience of pure happiness and exhilaration and feeling that extreme moment of presence. And I promise you, it always has something to do with freedom. Oh, I was skiing in Mammoth, or I was hiking in Peru, or I was, surfing in Australia, or it's always some story like that, right? There's always, I rode a motorcycle from Alaska to the tip of Chile, all kinds of stories like that. Those are always what you hear. And it's because freedom is directly linked to that feeling of being truly alive. And the problem with finances and economics and material goods and things is that in our world, they're directly linked to our physical freedom, our ability to eat the foods we want, to stay in the places we want to stay in, to travel to the places we want to travel to. I'm not talking about, for those of you who are so caught up in owning the branded items, for the girls and the women that are so caught up in owning the Louis bag and the Chanel bag and the Gucci and the whatever, that to me is an empty and a strange thing to get caught up in, absolutely. But I'm talking about the ability to spend a week or a month or 2 months on a beach somewhere in the South Pacific, or travel and see the great museums of the world, or do the kinds of things, or spend the time that you're trying to, that you want to spend with family, and really spend quality time with family, and not be dragged off and have to go support them and go to some job that's just human drudgery for you. Those have impacts on your quality of life and the quality of your relationships and the ability to spend quality time with the people around you. And I just mentioned a bit of an argument that came up between me and a young woman, and that argument to a good degree had to do with the pressures that I'm dealing with, that I have to go and continue to manage all the things that I'm managing, that mean that I can't just set aside everything for her to sleep all night, for us to hang out and have that quality moment. So my quality of life is 100% being affected by these things. So being told not to get upset about those things, let's look at it from a different perspective. To say they don't matter isn't true. And that's what I'm going to say. It's not true that doesn't matter. It does matter. To get upset about it, however, is a different thing, because now getting upset about it, is it changing anything? Is it actually serving you to be upset about these things? And the answer there is no. So I don't think a lot of people are giving this message in the way that they should be given the message. Now, it is true, death is the best advisor, and that's what he's talking about. He's really talking about using death as an advisor. He's basically telling you that right there. He's not using his own death as an advisor in that way, where he's looking at his own, him dying, but looking at someone that he loves very dearly dying, and being able to put himself in that state of mind, and realizing it brings context to everything. It brings a sense of relativity, and realizing, like, hey, there are things that are more important than money and our economic structure in this world. So absolutely, I agree with that. However, the economic circumstances we're engaging in are directly correlated to the types of interactions we can have with other people. We cannot just put aside our whole lives and spend, an unlimited amount of time with someone we really love unless we have that ability to do it economically. Or we go the other route and you just go bohemian, homeless, type of a pursuit where you kind of become the gypsy wanderer if you can pull that off. But that's going to take skill. And there's been times in my life, even to this day, where I still wonder maybe that would have been a good choice. I could have went that choice, the Rastafarian, the true Rastafarian way. I think sometimes people have the wrong idea about what Rastafarianism really is. Rastafarianism, I would say, and I'm no expert on it, but I would say at its deepest level is a complete and utter rejection of the economic institutions and governmental institutions that make up our world, and they call this world Babylon. And the deepest practitioners of it won't even engage. They will not pay their taxes. They won't even give money and engage in currency exchange. They will not be a part of it. I kind of agree with it. I agree with that. But that's a skill. You have to be very skilled at, I have a friend that I had met at a festival, and we were talking about his uncle, and his uncle can walk into a room, and the minute his uncle walks into a room, you just feel this feeling of peace just follows him. He is so powerful when he moves through places. It's not just the weed he's smoking. It's not just the vegetarian diet he's eating. It's a complete and utter mindset that he's been able to attain. But let me tell you, he's extremely skilled. For a 73-year-old man to be homeless and ride around on a bicycle and sleep outdoors, you better be really good at what you're doing, because otherwise you're going to have a tough time. And the guy's in shape, flexible, 72 years old. I mean, that's a tough life. So you got to have a lot of skills. So I'm kind of digressing there. I'm just saying that I've kind of started to see too many people act and say that money doesn't matter or something. That's bullshit. It matters so much. It has an enormous impact on our lives. Does it matter more than someone's life or your own life? No, it does not. Death will bring context to that. But on the other hand, even though money is this extremely important thing within our lives, this economic structure that we live in, to get upset about it doesn't do you one bit of good. Nothing. Does nothing for you. So it's kind of a pointless exercise. And so I think that people are discussing this in the wrong way, is what I'm saying. Because they're kind of trying to tell you, hey, the money doesn't really matter. There's other people that got it worse than you. I get what they're saying, but I don't know that it makes me feel any better that someone's got it worse than me. I mean, really. It does make me feel like, okay, it gives me context. It gives me perspective. It gives me a lot of things that I agree with. I see what they're saying, but does it make my situation any less irritating to me, what I'm dealing with? Not necessarily. That to make my situation less irritating, I have to accept it. I have to truly accept it. And I guess saying that someone else has it harder is an attempt at getting you to accept your own situation. Go, look, you could have to try and accept something far worse. You could be living in, sub-Saharan Africa and having your limbs amputated by some warlord. You could live, and absolutely, those are realities. They're very, very real. It's just, I think this concept is being presented a little too black and white. And that's kind of what Rich here was saying. Anyway, this guy tends to be a little black and white, so that's fine. But I do see the concept over and over again being kind of hammered as very black and white, and it's just not. What I would say is you need to look at the world and see that you're dealing with challenges. Is it going to help you to get upset about them? And it never really helps you to get upset about them. Don't get angry. Get busy. Right? Don't get angry, get industrious. Don't get angry, do what get some determination in there and do what you got to do to overcome whatever it is. So getting angry, getting upset, resenting, internalizing, doing those things is not going to help your situation. And so I agree with him 100%. I do think also that maybe his way of approaching, with the using death as an advisor thing, like putting himself in a state of mind where he can pretty much visualize losing someone he cares about, I think that is a great practice, because then you're going to treat these people around you that matter so much better. You're going to realize that they are not here for eternity, and that to say, ugly things to people and to not treat people well is something you can't take back, and you've only got a limited amount of time here, and why waste it on all that ugliness? And, I wish I had the quote right now, but the funny thing is that there's a quote by Bukowski. Charles Bukowski said something, Like, we're all going to die. This is paraphrasing, guys. We're all going to die. Each and every one of us is going to die. What a circus. And you would think that knowing this, the world would treat each other better and would treat each other with more compassion and love and things like that. But it's not the case at all. And it's because, but see, that's Bukowski's quote paraphrased. But the reason is that people aren't in the mindset of that. Most of our world is, especially here in the West, especially here in the U.S., we're walking around trying to deny death like it doesn't even exist all the time. It's not even real to us. We're living around walking around like a bunch of immortals, and we live our life that way, and we're not immortal. But we've tried to convince ourselves of that because nobody can really face that we're going to die, it seems like. I don't mean nobody, but it's a small percentage that are really looking death in the face and able to actually face it. And most people are just trying to sweep it under the rug and act like it's not there until it happens. And then what do? You're just devastated. You can't even function. So it's a bad way to approach everything. So I like Gary's approach there. I'm not picking it apart or anything. I'm just saying that I think there's more argument and discussion around the economics of how, our world is economically based, and it absolutely affects our quality of life when we're poor. It's much easier to be rich, guys. I think we all know that. So getting upset about it's understandable. It's just getting upset about it's not effective. That's would be my gripe. And then getting upset about it is going to affect your health, affect your mental state, and just have an overall negative impact on you as a person, and then not change anything about your external circumstances. So to use the quote from Buddha, to be angry is to swallow poison and to wish the other person's death. So doesn't work, doesn't do anything good, just hurts you. All right, let's see what we got.
I recommend fucking up on purpose. I'm being serious. It's so much better to eliminate expectations from the get. Then you're playing with house money. If you're scared of other people's opinion, fuck up on purpose, then everybody thinks you suck shit, then it's all upside.
Yeah. There's a lot to that. So I got a friend here, he works at Home Depot, and he went in there with a hard work ethic and everything, and went in there and put in hard shifts and really was doing his job. Meanwhile, there's a bunch of people, I don't know if you guys noticed, but if you go into a Walmart, you go into a Home Depot, you go into some of these places, they're not hiring the best of the best, guys. It's not the smartest of the smartest. It's not the most competent of the bunch that are working at these places. Some of these people are just borderline, barely above, they're, barely functional. Let's put it that way. They're barely, it's a question mark of how they survive. How do they feed themselves? How do they clothe themselves? Sometimes I see these individuals. Let me tell you, it's a question of how have you made it this far? Sometimes it's that bad. So in seeing that, he's some days wasn't feeling as good, or some days whatever, and so there was some discrepancy in his work output at certain moments, and then that started to be a major problem, and they started to hold him to the standard that he had started at. And so then he said, well, look at this, barely, this disabled person pretty much is working here that's not really disabled, not on paper, not I'm not saying they're truly disabled, they're not, they don't have a handicap placard in their car. They're not at that, right? But look at their output, and it's terrible. Their competency is awful. They have no efficiency. They don't know what the hell they're doing, and they're getting paid the same wage. So how am I being held to a higher standard just because you've seen that my capability is higher? That isn't really fair, and it's not fair, right? Then he should be paid more. He should be paid more than those people, because his output and his efficiency and his capability is far better, so he should be paid more money. And so because he went in there, instead of going with this attitude of fucking up in the beginning and not being so efficient and so good at his job early on, there would have been a different reaction to him, maybe having some of those slower days. So, but there's another side to that as well, is fucking up on purpose allows you to check your own ego, and it's a very difficult thing to do. You have to swallow a lot of pride and swallow down that egoic reaction and be kind of the village idiot in front of people on purpose to stalk your own ego and to get a chokehold around it because the ego looks for these instances to feed. It looks for conflict. It looks for moments when people ridicule you and laugh at you. It looks for moments where people puff up on you and tell you what to do, or judge you. The ego is always looking for those opportunities to feed itself. And you can look at this from two perspectives. You can look at this from a more scientific perspective or a metaphysical perspective. The metaphysical perspective is that this thing we call the ego is really an entity. The entity that it is, in my opinion, is Lucifer. It is Satan. It is the devil. And it is possessing you. And it convinces you to believe that that's your identity, that you are who's being attacked, that you are embodying whatever that moment is. In the case that maybe you're not doing the best job and someone's giving you a hard time for it, then you're going to fight back and say, hey, fuck you, what about you, and have this negative interaction with them. Or let's use road rage, that someone cuts you off and now it's like, fuck you, and you're flipping them off and you're having this interaction with someone. It is because you identify as the person who's been offended by someone cutting you off in traffic, and that's just, there's just this huge valid justification for that offense. This person could have, caused an accident, maybe, potentially, probably not. And yet you're really, really angry about that because you've been possessed by this entity that convinces you that this is your identity and this is everything that's important and this is all you are. When if you really believe, what I say is a lot of people out there claim they believe in God, they don't act like they believe in God. I'll tell you that right now, because they're deathly afraid of death. That's the worst possible thing that could happen to them. But in my opinion, if you really are this God-fearing, God-believing person, then death would mean nothing to you. So it's interesting to see the hypocrisies in people's ideologies, right? But I would say that that's because the ego has convinced you in that moment that this is all you are, when you're so much more than that. Now, that is the metaphysical perspective, that it really is Satan. That's my belief, that it's the deceiver. It's the great deceiver, the great trickster, that it has tricked everyone, that it doesn't even exist when it's existing in all of us. The other side of this is that it's a how would I put this? A conglomerate of neural pathways in the brain that amount to a certain set of personality traits that are then reinforced when certain stimuli activate those neural pathways in the brain, and then personality and characteristic traits come out as a response to that. And those responses, characteristics and personality traits that then are exhibited in these responses all tend towards misery. They all tend towards unhappiness. So therefore, they're not desirable. It is not something that would be ideal, that we wouldn't want that. So looking from the scientific perspective, then what we have to do is stop feeding those neural pathways. So when the trigger happens, we have to stop the neural pathway from firing. And that's a very difficult thing to do. And so what these practices do is we set up a situation to force the trigger to come up in our life. So someone criticizing you might be a trigger, right? So then I force that trigger so that then when the trigger is triggered and the neural pathway wants to fire, I block it and I don't allow the neural pathway to fire. And now over time, that neural pathway will begin to die off, and I'll form different neural pathways in its place that are more geared towards my personal peace and happiness. So I like the idea of what he's saying. It's actually one of the main concepts that are displayed in the Toltec art of stalking, which is ego management tactic, really. So yeah, great technique there. This guy seems to be very wise.
The system right now is so predicated on teaching our kids to memorize something and then regurgitate it a couple of weeks later in a world where all that information is at their fingertips.
So what's the warmest planet?
I can tell you in one fucking second, you idiots. I mean, it's just stupid.
Yeah, he's right. I don't know. I guess the problem is bureaucracy. Look, that's only one layer. Personally, I don't even think that's the biggest issue. Although, well, I guess it kind of directly linked to what I'm about to say, because they're focused on, like you said, regurgitating all this crap that the information's right there. You can find it if you need it. Once you decide in your life what you're going to do, you're going to want to not have to look everything up. It actually slows you down. Like I can't sit here and look everything up while I'm talking to you guys. Otherwise, this wouldn't flow at all. If everything I had to do, I didn't have anything in my head and I was just sort of empty space up there, that wouldn't work. But once you find out what you want to do, then you can start to amass some knowledge and really decide what's important to you. But yeah, schools don't go about that. But I would say that's not even the big problem. What I would say is the big problem is the schools don't teach students how to live life, which should be much more important. How do you maintain mental health? How do you deal with grief and deal with the death of a loved one? How do you deal with when a girlfriend or a significant other breaks up with you and cheats on you and does a bunch of crappy stuff to you? How do you deal with when somebody rips you off? How do you deal when you get fired from a job and it felt like that was everything to you and you can't pay your next mortgage payment? How do you deal with any of that stuff? They don't teach you the life skills. How do you hustle? How do you get out there and make money doing different things, which would be a great skill to have if you're going out into this world and, really going to be effective and be able to hopefully get to a place of some sort of economic autonomy. How do you do these things, right? They're really important, especially the emotional stuff. Like I said, the grief one's huge, like dealing with loss and death, dealing with relationship issues. How many people's lives have been destroyed by the romantic relationships that they have and have had and have gone wrong? How many people are just ruined by them, just absolutely ruined? There's so many skills there, interpersonal relationship skills. How do you make friends? How do you build friendships? How do you maintain them? How do you deal with people who are hecklers and bullies and treat you like crap? How do you do any of that stuff? They aren't teaching shit. They're not teaching any of that. And so you learn a bunch of history, you learn some math and sciences, you learn maybe you learn you take a Spanish course or whatever, you learn some quote unquote social studies, maybe you take a music course and you do some athletics, and maybe a chemistry course, right? And a biology. So they cram all that into you and you're ready for nothing. You're really ready for jack shit. He's 100% right, but I just think there's way more to what, he kind of kicked it off there with that, but there's so much wrong with what's going on in schools. It's insane.
I just got out of a relationship and I've spent the past couple of weeks ruminating.
A lot of my friends ruminate. They go, no, I'm going to learn from him. I'm like, no, you're not. I'm like, a little bit. Problem is the next relationship, she or he is going to be a different context. And so the patterns that you think you learned aren't going to apply to that same person. You're better to be your pure self and find the natural fit than to over-adjust to the next person in a fake environment of who you really are, thinking that you're correcting something that may not match that person.
It's an interesting message what he just stated there. He's at a different level within that discussion there than I would approach it from. I agree with being your pure authentic self always, first of all. But he's saying you're not going to learn from the last relationship because the behavior patterns and who that person is different than maybe who's going to be in front of you next. And I guess I could see what he's saying. I think what's happening there is more, and you see this with people, what they do is people have trauma from a past relationship. They bring it into the new relationship. They believe they see some sort of red flag behavior that indicates that this person is going to, behave in the same way that the last person did. And then what they're doing is they're reacting to a trigger. Same as what I was talking about when we were talking about the video where he was encouraging people to intentionally fuck up. You're having an egoic trigger and then you're reacting to it and you're having certain characteristics and personality traits exhibited in your reaction to someone in front of you. And that's not learning. That isn't learning. And it sounds to me what he's advising against, and his wording might be the issue for me, it's the language. What he's advising against is developing, these very specific reactionary mechanisms to the way that someone behaves and then applying it to someone else. And I guess I could agree with that. But I don't think, so ruminating's a problem because ruminating always means it's the ego involved, because ruminating never leads to any type of happy feeling within oneself, a feeling of freedom and liberation and health. Ruminating means you're stewing in something that's upsetting you and irritating you. And then maybe you stew in it and you think you're going to solve something. And you don't really solve things that way. So doing an emotional trauma processing exercise that's really geared towards processing past traumas which is not done through direct conversation therapy, that isn't how that works, is going to have a far more powerful effect on learning lessons from a past relationship, and will teach you lessons from that past relationship that will effectively address any relationships in the future. But I think his wording is a little strange there. It gives an impression, but I don't think he's wrong. I just think it's his words. What I believe he's talking about is actually being programmed by someone before in a previous relationship and allowing that program to affect how you interact with people in subsequent relationships. I think he's saying it in a weird way that doesn't sound like that, but that is exactly what happens to people. They become programmed to triggers that present themselves, and then their programming fires, which I'm saying that programming is the ego. And then when it fires, it has a negative impact internally and externally. Right. And then, yeah, Shakira said it starts with the self first and not the other. 100% it's with the self. So that's why I'm suggesting the personal work and the personal trauma processing exercises, because in that, you'll be able to understand more about yourself. And not only that, you'll understand more about the other person. It's the 5 mountains of awareness again. So as you climb the first mountain of awareness, you'll start to understand the second mountain of awareness, which is other people. So, yeah, it's just his wording, but 100%. You can learn. I've learned more from past relationships than anything else in my life. The biggest teachers in my life were definitely women I've dated. I've learned more from them than anything else. And I've learned a lot all over the place. I learned from some very hard situations in my life, but women were great teachers. A lot of them were very unconscious, and a lot of them were difficult people. And I then did a lot of work on myself to realize all of the mistakes I made, and then how that, in turn related to the way that they behaved. And I was able to make real strides in personal growth that way. So, yeah, he had a weird way of putting that is all. It just was a strange linguistic way of saying what he was saying. So, yeah.
Watching 50 to 70-year-olds shit on millennials when they're the ones who fucking parented them. This generation blows. Maybe if you didn't give them an 8th place trophy, they wouldn't be entitled, Susan.
Yeah.
Either your mother or your father put that negative opinion about yourself in your head. Once you realize that that's true, then you stop shitting on yourself and realize somebody else made you do that, and you start the process of loving yourself.
So it's interesting because Jordan Peterson has some rhetoric around this saying, don't let your kids, something to the effect of, don't let your kids grow up to be people you don't like. And I think that's probably really bad advice.
Don't do anything to have your kids not like you.
It's more about you not liking them. Don't allow your kids to behave in ways that you don't like. That's what he's saying. And it's very much him not taking responsibility for his own actions as a parent. So that kid's behaving that way for a reason. It was funny because I was a very angry kid, and my father liked to play tennis, and he was hoping that I would become some sort of tennis pro maybe. But he was no King Richard, let me tell you. So we weren't going to get there. I don't think. He was very angry, my father. And, one day I started exhibiting anger on the court and anger in other areas. And then my dad said to me, why are you so angry? How did you become so angry? Who taught you to be so angry? He couldn't put it together. My father had no idea. He couldn't see himself in the equation. He had no idea that, where do you think I became so angry from? It was very clear. It's funny because when you're a kid, like he said that to me and I didn't know the answer. I actually didn't know it then. I very clearly know what the answer is now. So, yes, the world is a result of the past, people that were in charge. But not all of us are responsible for that. So that also is an issue, right? Like I'm not contributing to this to this continuation of whatever this is. That's one of my problems with the reparations argument that was going on in San Francisco and then even in California in general and this stuff. There were going to be people paying reparations that had nothing ever to do with slavery at all. They didn't have nothing to do with it. They didn't benefit from it, and some of them were slaves themselves, like the Chinese, American population. So I, had a real issue with that, because you're being told to take responsibility for something you had literally no responsibility for. However, the other side of that, there's plenty of people who are not taking responsibility for something they actually are responsible for. And that happens all the time. We see it all the time. And I think he's got a great point about the millennials and older generations saying how shitty it is when they, very much contributed to that. And it'll be interesting to see what the subsequent generations are going to look like. And then he kind of flips it. So when we go to the second video, we're talking about trauma again. So now we're back to trauma and, the insecure and self-shaming thoughts and the self-limiting thoughts that you have and all of that stuff is past trauma. That's definitely past trauma. And parents and peers in school and all kinds of people play a role in someone adopting those mindsets. Parents more than anything, though, I would say. Parents especially have a role in the type of mindset that someone starts to grow up with. And so the only thing that I would say is I'm careful about not taking responsibility for things. So I'm going to have to say on this one, I a little bit disagree with him in that when he says the parent put this into you and now you can figure that out and then you can say, I had nothing to do with that and kind of let that go. No, not 100%. You have to also accept responsibility for accepting it as truth. Even though you're vulnerable and you're a child, and of course your parents have all this power, and it's not really a fair exchange because you're kind of at their mercy with that. There is a point in which you can say, hey, and I went through that with my parents. There was times when I said, I'm not going to adopt certain things. I refuse to do that. I refuse to think that way. I refuse to accept that. So you have that power. You have free will, just like anyone has free will. So I don't like the idea of when you don't take any responsibility yourself, you give all your power away. So whenever you're a victim of something, right, there's always going to be, there's the other person who's at fault, but this is where victims get really upset. They don't like to take responsibility for certain things that took place. Red flags, gut feelings, things that said, don't go down that dark alley. Things that said, don't go in that room or don't go to that party. Things that they know, they sense them. And then they don't want to take responsibility for that, for them ignoring those important cues. And so by putting it all on the predator or the person or whatever the situation is that caused the damage, right? By putting it all on that, you give all your power away and you can't change anything then. So now you can just be a victim again and again and again because you don't have any power to change those things. And that is what I don't like about that. But victims can get really touchy. Sometimes it's not even the victims that get touchy. It's the people observing the interaction where you're telling a victim, hey, you need to take a certain amount of responsibility here. And then people get very uppity about that. And it's like, well, I'm not saying that there's any less culpability for the person who was the transgressor or the person who perpetrated the trespass or the depending on how serious the situation was that did whatever was wrong, that broke another person's free will. I'm not saying they have any less responsibility or culpability in that interaction at all. But as the victim, if you take no responsibility whatsoever, then you're just setting yourself up for being a victim again. You have to be able to look back and go, oh, wow, there was gut feelings I had, there were indicators, there were cues, there were things I saw that told me that, hey, look out, watch out, something's going on here. So you got to take a certain amount of personal responsibility every time, so that way you are a little bit less responsible a little bit less susceptible is the word I was looking for. A little bit less susceptible in the future to someone victimizing you, to someone doing the same thing to you, because then you won't ignore those things. You'll pick up on micro expressions, if we want to use that term when it comes to people's expression or whatever. You'll pick up on the cues and indicators. You'll pick up on the vibe. You'll pick up on things and you go, oh, I've been here before. I don't like this. I'm going to avoid this right now. Something's not right, right? That way you can learn from mistakes you made and grow. Yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm saying. So even if you're a victim of something really terrible, there's always a certain amount of something that you could have done that can give you, a small chance of a different outcome. Because people say that to me all the time about riding the motorcycle. Oh, it's not you riding the motorcycle, it's someone else is going to hit you. And so their attitude is that victimized kind of attitude of there's nothing I can do. That's not true. Every time I've been hit on the bike, every time I've had something go wrong, I've always had a gut feeling and a moment of some cues that are coming in. They're coming so fast that there's definitely a subconscious level of, data processing that goes on, that then I've ignored it or I didn't listen to it. I just kind of continued on my way without addressing this change that I felt. And then bad things happened because of that. So then when I look back, I go, wow, I should have listened to that. I should have got off the road, took a moment. Hey, shut the bike down for a second. Get off the bike, take the helmet off, look around. Okay, let's reset. I was feeling something weird there. Get back on the bike, take a different route, make a different turn, go a different way, slow down. So many things you could do different, but instead just did the same thing, even though I felt there was something off, and guess what? The result's bad. And so that's what I'm kind of talking about here in general with that stuff. So that's the only thing I would say there about what he was saying. Yeah, your parents are at fault for a lot of mindsets and things like that people go through, especially the really crippled type of mindsets of fear and self-loathing and lack of self-confidence and, limiting mindsets and all that stuff. But at some point, if you're really going to grow, you're going to have to take a certain amount of responsibility for adopting those mindsets, because no one can actually force you to think a certain way. You choose to. So even if someone just brainwashes you, I've worked with people who are victims of cults. Ultimately, the victims of cults are brainwashed, but they're brainwashed willingly. They allow their mindset to be changed. They're the ones who actually change and adopt into that mindset. So they can't just blame the cult entirely. It's their fault as well. All right, guys. So very interesting stuff there, though. Interesting. Yeah. All right, guys. So that's it for today. I usually we try to do 2 episodes, but today there just wasn't enough time. We got slowed down. Then we were talking about strategy for dealing with this YouTube ban that we just went through. So we're going to be working on that. And next week we'll probably attempt to try and get 2 episodes in. We're going to be uploading the entire channel on another YouTube. We'll call it the same thing, which we can do, by the way. So we'll call it the same thing, but it'll be a different email address to link to the account. And once we get that up and running, we'll let you guys know. We appealed the decision, but I've been through this, and especially when they delete like that, they didn't suspend it. They didn't restrict it. They deleted it. That's a giant fuck you. That's what they're saying. So we're going to be working on that stuff, guys, and just dealing with censorship issues. And yeah, we might look into ways to try and get a hold of you guys, anyone who's followers, anyone who's subscribers, and start amassing a data sheet. That way we can have channels on backup. So when we do get deleted for our First Amendment right, we will hopefully have a way to contact you and then direct you to the new channel that pops up. I think that's what we're going to be trying to do to manage this woke ridiculousness that we're dealing with. So. All right, guys, that's going to be it for this one. Great to be here. Thanks again, Shakira. You're our greatest fan. Really appreciate you. We'll see you on the next one. Okay, guys, hopefully you've been liking the content we've been providing so far. We've been covering a lot of different topics here. And, for long form, you're checking us out here on YouTube. Also, you can find us on Rumble for short form. You can find us on Instagram and TikTok at ThePemPod. Also, be sure to check out psychedelis.com. There we're providing a lot of different services. We've actually made further progress on the development of the website, which eventually will be an app. You can find treatment options there, including retreat centers, clinical facilities, individual trip sitters, clinicians, facilitators, integration coaches. We've got all that up now, and then we've got something called the Learning Center where you can go if you don't really know that much about psychedelic therapy or you want to learn something about a particular niche there. We will be including that soon. So go ahead and check out all of those areas there if you guys want, and just happy to be here with you. So hopefully have you here taking in more of our content in the near future. Thanks. It'd be great if you left a like, and also if you'd leave a comment would be awesome. We'd love to interact with you guys in the comments below. Also, if you would like to have me react to a video that you choose and that you think would be a good one for me to take a look at, or even a personal video or request of some sort, you can email us at ThePemPod@gmail.com, and I'd love to hear from you and interact with you there.